Okay, here we go. Tape is still rolling. Ready, and action.
The coolest job in the kitchen is walking through the set, carrying various items. Go to the back corner or go towards where Chris is coming from.
Action.
You know, I think I've done it once. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm not camera friendly or something, but I'm rarely ever asked to do that very important task. Kelly's kind of our little superstar, so we try to put her in front of the camera as much as possible. You know, she's young, she's up and coming. She's, you know, maybe the next talent on Cook's Country, so we're just getting her primed and ready to go.
Lynn might be the toughest one, actually. She seems like the nicest, but when she's pissed at you, it's not pretty. And her favorite thing to do, she'll send them out, actually right across the street there to the lemonade veggie stand. And obviously there's not a lot of traffic on the street, and she makes you sell like, I forget, it's like gallons of lemonade in a day. So you're basically like whoring yourself out. If you don't get rid of it, you know, make a profit on it, you have to consume it yourself. And we lost the test cook last year to just overconsumption of lemonade.
I think the people who really get overlooked are the runners, because as test cooks, we have to know just our segment, and we're very focused on our segment and on our recipe. But the runners have to know sort of several recipes in sequence, so it's a lot for them to concentrate on. We get to do our segment, and then we can just relax, and they can't. They have to keep a high level of energy all day long.
I'm just saying, this army's arguing.
We actually had this conversation about how many bowls.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, there's two in the one.
And you still managed to screw it up.
I know. Well, look who's teaching me.
Who?
You guys.
I am in charge of getting the beauty shots to the photographers outside in a timely manner.
Okay.
After Lynn carefully, delicately, artistically stacks onions.
I don't know what meal it is, but it's a beauty shot. It's when Steven makes food look like porn. Food porn.
This is one of the worst things that can possibly happen in a professional kitchen. Someone starts to unroll it and it cuts in a little bit, and then they don't fix it right away, and then the next person does it and they don't fix it right. And soon, I mean, just like, look at this. So I'm coming over, I'm gonna wrap, and this is what I have to deal with. This is how it should work. See, full length. You know, so if I ever find the person that left it like that, and the problem is there's probably more than one person, but one person starts that kind of thing, it's not gonna be pretty. And I hope there's no camera around when that goes down.
Ina and Mabel have been our kitchen assistants up here in the country for the last 3 years. Without them, we would not be able to do our job. They are incredible. They stay on top of things. They keep us laughing, and they are just sharp tickets, hard workers, and we couldn't do it without them. They're the backbone of the kitchen.
This is their secret trick right over here. Directly next to their work.
Oh, wine? Yeah. Oh. I put a little bit of wine in my green tea. With the green tea, I put a little bit of wine and...
It's an antioxidant power. Right?
Yeah. I give a lot of energy.
So tonight, on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm delighted to introduce Chris Kimball and the cast from America's Test Kitchen. They are joining us to discuss the America's Test Kitchen Healthy Family Cookbook. Currently in its 10th season, America's Test Kitchen is the most watched cooking show on public television. Chris Kimball and the Test Cooks solve everyday cooking problems, test equipment, and taste supermarket ingredients. Chris Kimball is the host of America's Test Kitchen and the founder, publisher, and an editor for Cooks Illustrated and Cook's Country. Chris is a regular contributor to the CBS Early Show and has been...
They just fired Harry Smith, so what? I mean, you know. Yeah, there's a downer.
We can only go uphill from here, though.
This is going to be a very personal evening.
He's mad.
I hope you're still a contributor for The New Yorker and The Wall Street Journal.
Everybody fired me. It's okay. It's fine.
He is also the author of The Cook's Bible, The Kitchen Detective, and Christopher Award-winning Dear Charlie. Jack Bishop is the editorial director of America's Test Kitchen and directed the launch of Cook's Country. He manages editorial operations at both magazines and edited The Best Recipe, establishing the books division at America's Test Kitchen. Julia Collin Davison is a senior editor for the books division of America's Test Kitchen, as well as being an on-screen test cook. Bridget Lancaster is an on-screen test cook for America's Test Kitchen and deputy editor of Cook's Country. Adam Reed is keeper of the Equipment Corner segment on America's Test Kitchen and an editor for Cooks Illustrated for 10 years. I'll turn things over to Chris now, but first please join me in welcoming the cast from America's Test Kitchen.
All right, so they really did fire Harry Smith last week, by the way. So, but I won't talk about that anymore, right? I'm not upset about it. So this is basically a Q&A session. So we'll talk just briefly, but we're not going to give you a 1-hour commercial for books. And we're here to answer your questions and have a good time. But this is one of Bridget's favorite letters ever received. No, not the one about how beautiful you are and they want to go out to dinner with you. That's a different one.
Too many of those.
This is a mother of a 4-year-old, and the letter, she was writing a letter in the words of her 4-year-old about our television show, and she writes, the 4-year-old, "Why is that man standing there watching?"
I ask myself
that all the time.
every week.
That's not on the TV show. She really feels for Chris Kimball. Is he going to learn how to cook? Why doesn't he know? Didn't his mother teach him? No, she didn't actually. So do you have an answer for that? Why I stand there? That's all I do. I don't get to cook. I get to use a garlic press. I roll out pastry dough once a year, and I get to carve a turkey.
Yeah,
that's about it. That's pretty much my repertoire.
That's your job, but you're good at that.
I'm very good. I have a lot of practice.
That's right.
11 years. Oh, certified humane products. We get asked, "Well, you want to? Somebody else want to take this?"
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are two issues. We've approached it from the way we usually approach it, which is we have done taste tests where we are tasting organic products or grass-fed beef versus grain-fed beef, and we've reported on those results. Sometimes the more natural product actually tastes better, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, frankly, if you're used to the turkeys we've all grown up with, and you have an heirloom turkey, it's a bit of a shock, a bit of a surprise. It's basically like having another bird. The main issue, though, frankly, isn't about taste. It's about politics and ethics in the kitchen, and those are the reasons to be buying organic. I think personally, the bigger differences are about local versus stuff that was grown humanely, organically 5,000 miles away in Mexico. It's probably not going to taste as good as something that was grown locally, no matter how it was grown.
Could I just inject a note involving deer hunting? I'm just going to ruin this evening for Jack.
It's all right.
I just posted on a blog a picture. I finally, because I deer hunt, I actually got one this year and posted. I got 40,000 hits on this one thing with all these comments. Can I just say something? Everyone's so interested in locally sourced foods, right, and slow foods. And this is, go to the foodie convention, everybody. But if you talk about hunting and bringing home your own meat to shot in the woods, that's like, oh, you can't do that. I mean, isn't that the ultimate local sourcing? I mean, really. Okay, I'm done. Next question. But it just drives me crazy. I'm sorry. Whatever. Yeah.
I get migraines from red wine, and I was wondering if it's a bottle of red wine, there's nothing you can't make the recipe. But if there is a small amount of red wine in a recipe, is there a reasonable substitution that works like 90% of the time or something?
Well, first of all, have you tried biodynamic wines? Because we're actually starting a radio show. Now, this is a commercial. January 8th in GBH, 2 p.m. Saturday afternoons. We're running for 13 weeks, 1-hour show. That's our commercial. That was very good, sneaky. But we're doing a segment on biodynamic and natural wines. You might just try that and see if that's a big difference for you, because I consume many bottles of it, and I felt fine the next day. I don't know if that has the histamine problem or headache problem. Oh, the tannins. Well, anyway. Verjus, Verjus, which is essentially grape juice that's not alcoholic. And that's usually what we recommend.
Yeah, or
vinegar or something.
You know, the simplest substitute, if you're talking about a recipe that's got a half a cup of wine, we say is usually you need the liquid, so use a broth and add some vinegar or lemon juice, just because you're going to generally need some acidity. That's a better substitute probably for white wine than red wine, but at least, you know, you need the liquid in order to make the recipe work. That's the best way to do it. Although the Verjus, if you have Verjus, is going to be a closer approximation of the flavor.
Well,
Eat it.
well, no, it started because we had USA Today in about 3 years ago for a Thanksgiving piece, and we made a bunch of pies, obviously, and some of the crusts were great, and some of them.
Why are you looking at me?
I don't know. For support?
Okay.
Not critically, and some of them weren't, and I've made I don't know thousands of pie crusts, and sometimes they turn out great, and sometimes they don't. And so the task of the kitchen was, can you come up with a foolproof recipe? Well, as you all know, making the perfect pie crust is probably the hardest thing in the world. So one of our test cooks did a lot of work. We tried, Rose Berenbaum's recipes. We tried putting baking powder. We tried putting vinegar in it. And we weighed all of our ingredients and everything else. We tried everything. And finally, the notion of alcohol came up, because you can add more water to the dough when you roll it out. But obviously, since vodka is about 50% alcohol, we use half water, half vodka. So 25% of the liquid's going to evaporate in the oven. So when you end up, the final baked product is actually very flaky. If you have a wet dough, it tends not to be flaky. So it's easy to roll out, but when it's baked, it's flaky. So I don't remember how did Guy Crosby come up with that? Our science editor?
Science is what told us to.
I don't remember.
Yeah, and I think, there are other places, alcohol is often added to frozen desserts for a somewhat different reason, but for ice cream or sorbets, and so it's not that much of a stretch, and that's actually a fairly common thing, to have a little bit of alcohol in a sorbet to keep it from freezing up really hard. And so sometimes alcohol does show up in desserts and pastry making, although I don't think I've ever seen it in pie dough. But the leap of, what can you put that's wet in pie dough that's not going to make the dough tough, we were that was the problem we were trying to solve. And alcohol is wet, and it won't make it tough, because it will evaporate.
Well, alcohol doesn't react with the flour to form gluten either. That's the other thing about it. So. Oh, sorry, I forgot what I was supposed to do. This happens all day. They always do. I just drool in the corner. They poke me.
Wake up.
Hey, Chris, you're supposed to write an editorial. Okay, let's go. The question is, how do we decide what recipes to make and put in the magazine, and who ends up writing about the stories? And it's the whole selection process. Someone want to take that down there?
The readers basically decide what we put in the magazines. We send out a lot of different surveys daily with multiple ideas of things that we might want to write about, things that we're interested in, things that we just want to see if they rate well or not. And we get those ratings back, and the ratings have to be over a certain number in order for us to put it in our magazine. And then when we start to get some ideas of what might work in, say, an October issue, looking at seasonality, we'll craft a lineup. And then as far as who gets to do what in the, as far as writing, usually we like to give the stories to people that have an interest in that, because they'll work harder for free. Otherwise, sometimes, when you're assigning stories to people, you also throw a loop at them and give them something completely out of their comfort zone. And it's usually those people that will come up with something kind of ingenious, because they're already thinking.
We just gave Yvonne is one of our in-house bakers, and she's on the show occasionally, and she was making a cucumber salad yesterday. I just said, what? Is that one example of throwing someone?
Exactly, but she'll probably come up with something ingenious.
She'll bake them.
She'll bake it into a pie.
And by the way, we've rated 6,000 or 7,000 recipes over the years. and the top 10 recipes. I mean, I know probably in this crowd you're more adventurous, but out of all those recipes, green bean casserole showed up twice. Tomato sauce, pasta with butter and cheese. I mean, you know. Well, and the other thing is, you're also, I like to say this because I'm contentious, but you're all liars, of course, because you say you want vegetables and fish, you know, which we all do, and then we know what you make because Jack, you know, has these things rated after it goes in the magazine, and you all want meat and chocolate and potatoes, all together at the same time, preferably. Yep. So that's actually changing. That's not entirely true, but I would think 5 or 6 years ago that was a pretty fair statement. And today, it's better.
Yeah, it has changed.
It has changed.
If we put together a lineup solely based on popularity 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been pork, chicken, and potatoes. And so what we really are looking at is, well, among the vegetable stories we're suggesting, which of those vegetable stories are resonating, because vegetables don't seem to do as well as, you know, pork stories or, you know, and potatoes, well, that's a vegetable, but, you know, that you'd like, if we just did potato stories, at least according to the survey, everyone would be very happy.
So basically, we've learned to market our vegetables, you know, green beans with pork, green beans with potatoes, green beans with chicken. Then we can put it in the magazine.
Cheese stuffed green beans.
Yeah. Casserole.
And I would add, actually, it's a little different for the equipment because we're always balancing trying to cover everything that's new and coming out with updating testings that we've already done where models may have been discontinued or there may be some sort of new innovation in that, you know, for instance, say cookie sheets and there's a new gold nonstick coating. Well, we want to get that in there definitely. So we're balancing the updates with the new stuff and the equipment.
She asked about whether we could do a book with a book or magazine with menus about entertaining. That's perfect. Thank you. Who would like to segue? I think Julia runs our book department, so it's time for you to talk about our new.
Yeah, we're actually in the middle of doing a menu book right now. So another quick advertisement. It's a book divided by season, so spring, summer, fall, winter. And in each season we have 10 menus, one of which is vegetarian. All the menus serve 8 people. And there's a timeline, and of course we picked Cook's Illustrated or Cook's Country, main courses and desserts. But then we filled in the gaps with easy to make but interestingly paired ingredients. So easy salads with sort of interesting combinations that work. And we are mindful that you don't want to pull out every pot and pan. You probably only have one oven, and that you have a lot of other things to do when people come for dinner, like make sure the house is clean and, you know, put the tablecloth on the table. So that we're very mindful to pick one recipe that might involve a little bit of work, and that's the showstopper, and make everything else a little bit easier. So the book's coming out soon. Oh, and the 5th chapter is a celebration and big batch. So how to have a chili party for 15 people, how to do Thanksgiving dinner. So yeah, that should be coming out next year. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I can add, I think this is a ploy to feed more people at home, but part of the process that Julia has devised is the test cook needs to prepare the entire menu at once so that we can, well, the idea was we needed to make sure that the portions were right, also that the workflow was right in the sense of being able to do this, but I actually think they just wanted to make a lot of menus so that people would have complete dinners to take home from the test kitchen rather than the usual, you know, sometimes unbalanced meals that come out of the test kitchen otherwise.
8 batches of brownies in one day, maybe, followed by tuna salad.
No,
all you can eat.
No. Today it was fudge.
Yes.
People had many pounds of fudge going.
Broken fudge. Did you see that? It was separated.
Oh, bad fudge.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That usually goes.
Many pounds of bad fudge.
It goes to marketing.
No, it goes to accounting. The really bad stuff goes to accounting. Substitutions for nuts suggestions.
In baking or cooking or? Well, I mean, often you'll find that they're probably not needed. It's going to are seeds a problem? Because things like pine nuts usually don't. Seeds are okay. I mean, pine nuts have a similar. They're not actually a nut; they're a seed. They have a similar. Can't do pine nuts. Cheese. Bacon.
Pork.
Bacon. I think what nuts add is a nice texture, crunchy texture. I mean, obviously they have flavor, but if you're using them to sprinkle on something or as a crust on something, you may just want to use a little bit more breadcrumbs, some hard Parmesan cheese, things like that, things that are going to give you texture and really dense flavor as well. Sorry.
What other recipes are as hard to make as pie crusts?
Biscuits.
Oh, we don't have enough time to go through the list of
seriously.
that are challenging. Well, I think the one, actually going back to fudge, you can have some other ones, but
Yeah.
we did about 3 years ago decide to make a classic fudge recipe. And so the gentleman actually who worked on it, he quit soon after. No, he actually did, because he had shoulder separation problems, among other things. But he made it for 2 months and made 2,000 pounds of it. And I said, we'll only publish the recipe if I could make it at home without a really good instant read thermometer to get the sugar syrup. So I made it, and it seized. And I came and I said, look, this is just not foolproof. And so someone said, well, why don't we see what Martha Stewart does? And so we looked at her recipe, and she said, basically said, if it doesn't work out too well, pour it over ice cream. God bless Martha. I mean, that's pretty creative stuff, But we never published that recipe because it was just too difficult. You needed a really good thermometer. And so that remains in the archive, or it's online probably, right? The last refuge of bad recipes. What about some other ones?
I think people have trouble making biscuits. They're often, or chicken and dumplings, even any of those kind of things. We call them sinkers, because the dumplings just go right down to the bottom of the pot. I think anytime you're dealing with a dough.
No, we had a phone call on the radio show, plug, from a woman who said she had a recipe called chicken and dumpling.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they all sunk together at the bottom.
And it melted.
One huge
giant dumpling.
Well, she said she had one chicken and one dumpling. It was perfect.
That's right.
Julia, do you have any?
Yeah, I think the simplest things are the hardest to make, like a really good roast chicken with not a lot of seasonings to cover up, skin that's flabby or overcooked meat, not a lot of sauce. I think roast chicken's up there in my book.
St. Louis ribs. I mean, we usually will run a gas variation or give instructions for how to modify the charcoal into gas with almost every grilling recipe, or vice versa. If the recipe will call basically for gas, then we would convert it to charcoal. But if it's a 2-level fire, which I'm assuming it is, with all the coals banked on one side, at that point, that means all the heat source is coming from one side and you have a cold spot on the grill. So basically you could set your gas grill up the same way. You could brown it all over the heat and then just turn off the burners that are underneath your ribs and leave the fire and your little smoke packet over right on the direct fire. You do have to really watch your grill at that point, though, because I find that gas grills can be a bit more finicky as far as having to maintain it. You'll think you've maintained it, so you'll turn it up and you'll come back out and it's all in flames. So you do have to watch it. Yeah, I've seen St. Louis ribs go up in flames.
Some of it will depend a little bit on how many burners are in your gas grill.
Sure.
The 2 burners will not be quite as hot as the 3 burners, so you just have to watch it. Bridget's exactly right. You have to give it some careful attention for 20 minutes or so and make those adjustments. The other thing is that if you're smoking something, just because you're working with a gas grill doesn't mean you can't smoke. You can take a disposable aluminum pan, like a pie plate or something, and put soaked wood chips on that and put it over the burner that stays on while you're finishing the ribs. And that way you'll get not quite the same quality of smoke you would get from a charcoal grill, but some smokiness.
Well, I just bought an expensive
Of course.
Inferno.
quick, man, she's quick. Gas grill, and it has a little drawer you pull out to put the soaked
those
wood
are
chips in.
great.
Yeah, they're great. After 5 minutes, they were incinerated.
Is that an offset? Did you have an offset smoker?
No, this is a gas grill.
Oh.
No, it has a little drawer thing. I mean, I went back to the packet, as you said, which worked fine. But the little drawer things, I mean, I put it on absolute low.
Well, the other thing to think about in terms of temperature on a gas grill when you're doing barbecue is to try to hover below 300. So like Bridget said, constantly keep your eye on it, make sure it's not engulfed in flames. But if you can maintain the temperature between 275 and 300, that's a good approximation of what we're doing on the gas grill.
Have you guys, or will you guys do wild game recipes on the show?
That would be high on my list, but I don't think anybody else in this panel. Oh, sorry, repeat the question. Will we do wild game recipes on the show? The answer is probably not, but because it wouldn't. It would rank near the bottom of the list.
Yes, I mean, we all have our personal preferences, peccadillos, whatever we might call them, but we all agree to live and die by the survey. And so when we ask, you know, are you interested in wild game? You know, for most people, the answer is no. Even lamb, which doesn't really quite qualify, is a bit of a hard sell. You know, that's about as adventurous as we get. We've done 1 or 2 duck recipes. I think we did a goose recipe once.
And a rabbit.
Yes, but you know, they just, you know, partly because we do 32 pages in Cooks Illustrated and Cooks Country every year, every issue only 6 times a year. We want to make sure that we're putting recipes that not necessarily appeal to everybody, but that have broad rather than limited appeal. So even if Chris feels passionately about it, we're not doing squirrel recipes or.
Look, you make fun of squirrel. I mean, you shouldn't make fun of squirrel. It makes a great spaghetti sauce. But it's gray squirrel versus red squirrel's the test.
I promise you, there will not be any recipes in the menu book for entertaining at Chris Kimball's house.
Squirrel for 8.
That might be good for the blog.
Actually, that's a new cookbook idea. Squirrel for 8. Squirrel at 8. How about that? The question is, how many people on our staff have degrees from a culinary school? First of all, we have about 130 people on the staff, and in the test kitchen, 45-ish people. And all of them have either restaurant experience or culinary school experience, right?
Yeah, the dirty secret is that Chris and I are the only people,
except for the people
in the editorial department who don't have any cooking school experience. So,
thanks for sharing, Jack.
Yeah, we were there first, so we were grandfathered in.
That's also an appropriate term, grandfather. Yeah.
Actually, we I don't know, it was years ago now. It was probably 5 years ago when we did a saucepan testing. There was one copper model in there, and copper is great. It's really conductive, but most people are not used to cooking with something that responds that quickly. And so when we had a bunch of different test cooks test these things, which we always try to do, there were some problems with it just because people weren't that accustomed to it. Also, obviously, the expense, and it's super heavy, and it's just not something we feel like most people are going to invest in. So, you know, we may do them as little sidebars or in the equipment corner in the back of Cooks Illustrated, but we probably wouldn't end up doing a test of, you know, all copper skillets comparing different brands or copper cookware sets or anything.
There's also 200, I mean, the All-Clad's $230 or $40 for a 3-quart, right, or something?
Right.
So, the question is about gluten-free mixes or powders versus using all-purpose flour. In the Healthy book, did you?
Yeah, you know, in the Healthy book, we started down that path, but as you said, the gluten-free world in terms of the baking mixes is really confusing, and we didn't have time to do it right, so we decided not to do it at all. But I do know that the baking mixes we tried had at least 4 or 5 different things in it, and some of them were pretty good. If you see me after, I'll try to remember the names of the cookbook. Yeah.
The question is, where do we buy the food to use in the test kitchen for testing?
Yeah, we have 2 full-time shoppers who go to all the supermarkets, you know, from Whole Foods to Stop and Shop and Shaw's and whatnot. We also have food delivered from a supermarket because obviously, even though we're going through vast quantities of canned tomatoes, we can't use a big industrial can. We have to use you know, a residential size, you know, a small can. But we do have purveyors for meat and butter and milk. I mean, I forget how many pounds of butter we go through in a week. I think it's, you know, 50, 60 pounds of butter in a week. And
that's just for your recipe.
And that's just for my toast. So.
That doesn't include Bridget. Bridget's got 500 pounds of pork every week.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, no, it's a full-time job for 2 people. And in the kitchen, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's cupboards, obviously, and every cupboard has a test cook's name on it. So, and they have a secret stash of ingredients that they're working with, and they have their own dedicated refrigerator with their own stuff. So that the shopping is not only about the shopping, but the organizing of all the ingredients. It's pretty incredible.
Okay, it's time for a quiz. How much do you think we spend on food with the test kitchen here? Wait, I did this on Twitter. Yeah, well, you're about to find out. I did this about 6 months ago, almost passed out when I got the number.
And did I even tell you the right number?
Oh, I forgot. The Jack Bishop discount. So, okay, let's have some guesses. No, the annual. How much total money we spend per year on just food for the test kitchen?
Are you trying to kill Chris?
Let's have a different number. That was $2.5 million. No, it's less than that.
We're gonna get those squirrel recipes now.
You stuff them with foie gras for $2.5 million. Yeah, it's now 140,000. It's $470,000, right? That's about right. Oh no, Jack's telling me it's more.
5 1/4, but we'll take the 475.
$500,000 a year, and we shop at Stop and Shop, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
I
they
mean,
love Roach Brothers. Yeah.
This is a question about do we have more information about the world of legumes? That'll be our next cookbook, the world of legumes. Yes, we do. We have the brining.
Yeah,
You want to talk about brining beans? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Method.
And it was a real joke at the beginning, like, oh, really? You're going to brine beans now? Because everything in the test kitchen is brined. And when it worked, we were all really laughing, like, yeah, we really are going to brine beans. It's amazing how well it worked. My other favorite bean trick is putting baking powder soda in with black beans to help keep them black, so they don't turn that gray color. Just a little pinch. Early on, at the beginning.
When you're simmering them.
You want to get the Chef's Choice 130 knife sharpener. I would say one of the biggest problems in home kitchens, whenever I go to my friends' houses and I'm going to finish up something or make a salad and I pull out their knives, you couldn't cut through soft butter with their knives. So a knife sharpener is a key thing, and the Chef's Choice 130 is our favorite one. If you have some money to spend on an instant read thermometer, the Thermapen Splash Proof Instant Read Thermometer, it's close to $100. It's like $96 or $97, so it's not cheap, but it's great. If you use this thing, you will never overcook another piece of meat. Another thing that I love, it's also by ThermoWorks. It's a timer thermometer combination, and it's an alarm that you can set to ring when it reaches a programmed temperature that you can put in yourself. And it's got a probe that stays in, the bread you're baking or the meat that you're roasting, whatever you're cooking with it. And the probe plugs into the little base unit, and when it reaches, 138 or 140 for pork, if that's what you're going for, it will beep. And that way, you're almost guaranteed never to overcook another piece of meat. You just want to be careful with those to double check that the probe part is accurate, because we've had problems with that in the past. But those are 3 good ones.
How about the American Innovative Timer?
Oh my God, I still can't stand that timer. Chris's favorite timer, which he swears is intuitive, is this thing.
It's not intuitive. It's impossible.
It's got collar rings
an IQ
and
test.
dials.
Oh, I can't stand that.
I love that timer.
I love it.
I love it. I
Jack,
have it
it's
at
a
home.
tie, Jack. Break the tie.
I don't think you should have to read a manual to use a timer.
Seriously.
I don't like cooking with things that make me feel stupid either. And that does it in about.
Should I leave now?
Yes, exactly.
One more, I'll give you a bonus. If you're looking for a scale, the OXO digital food scale, rockin' good scale. It's about $50. Goes up to 11 pounds. You can pull the readout, which is big and easy to read. You can pull it away, so if you're measuring something in a huge bowl, it doesn't obscure the readout, and you can detach the little weighing platform and actually keep it clean, which is very nice.
There was a lot of enthusiasm. Right? You were.
I have more.
Boy, you were excited.
4 pairs of good tongs, a good chef's knife, and a cutting board. No, seriously. So you're talking about sort of starting a kitchen from scratch. The question was, which are the 6 key kitchen utensils, right? I'm serious. I probably would have 2 pairs of tongs. In my kitchen at home, I have 5, and I use them all every day. I have the OXO Good Grips.
You've only got 6, Adam. You can't have 2 of them be the same.
Okay.
That doesn't work.
1 pair of tongs for sure. The Victorinox Forstner Fibrox 8-inch chef's knife. You want to have a good chef's knife, and that one, there's a lot of dispute and debate and conversation about which knives are best. We've always really liked that one. It stays fairly sharp. It's got a sort of a tacky handle that doesn't get too slippery. It's got a nice flex, and it's pretty cheap. Yeah. It's $25. You want to have a good cutting board. If you can get a polyurethane one that fits into the dishwasher, that's ideal, because it's a soft for the knife strike, and you can sanitize it in the dishwasher. Does anyone else want to throw in any
microplane?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
For grating cheese or chocolate or zesting citrus fruits, the microplane grater zester.
And a heat-proof rubber spatula.
Fabulous thing.
Those are the 2 from me.
Yep. Chris, what's your favorite?
The American Innovative Timer.
That's Chris's last question for the evening.
After the knife, I'm getting the timer. You need a timer. I mean, I've cooked with a number of people over the years, and some of them never used a timer and knew when things were ready intuitively. That's not me. No, I need a timer, a multi-timer. So.
In terms of pots and pans, though, I'm pretty minimalist. And I think you could get away with a Dutch oven, a 12-inch skillet with a lid, and a rimmed baking sheet. I think those three pieces, you could... a rimmed baking sheet,
That's a good
and if you had a wire rack that fit inside it, those are the three things that I think you could make almost any recipe.
Yeah.
I actually went away for a years ago and had a tiny little kitchen, and
you were sent away.
I was banished, and I brought, I couldn't bring that much cookware. I brought a 3-quart all-clad straight-sided saute pan. I used that for sautéing. I used it for roasting. I used it for braising. I used it for baking. It actually worked really, really well. It was a great pan. They're not cheap. They're like close to $250, $245, but they're wonderful.
The question's about the testing process, and we have 45 test cooks. We have 3 groups. Julie heads up the book division. I guess Bridget's doing Cook's Country. Yes, and then we have Cooks Illustrated. So we have 3 separate teams which are independent. We look at the surveys, pick a recipe. Jack will, for editorial director, will probably help with that process. And we do a lineup, and then we start with the recipe. We find 20 versions of it in cookbooks, online occasionally, other places. Whomever is running that particular recipe will pick 5 versions to make. They're made in the test kitchen. They do a blind tasting. They like things, they don't like things. We cobble together a working recipe, and we go to work. One person's in charge of the recipe development, but every stage in the testing, he or she will share those tastes with sheets to be filled out. I like this, I didn't like that. They're all blind taste tests. And then it's made, I would say it cooks 50 times at least, 40 to 80 times it's made. All-purpose flour, cake flour, this kind of oil, that kind of oil. And then when that's done, it's sent out with a survey to a bunch of folks who've volunteered to make our recipes, probably some of you. And we get those results back. And Jack, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, so we will send a recipe out and usually get somewhere between 50 and 200 people to make the recipe, give it a road test, and write back with their experience. Couple things. Nobody actually follows those recipes, even though they're doing a road test. So we're trying to read the tea leaves about. It's actually a good check for us to go back in the kitchen and say, these are the things people are going to do to our recipe in terms of the substitutions or the places that they're going to make shortcuts. We ask all kinds of feedback, but the most important question is the last question in the survey, which is, would you make the recipe again? And basically, our standard is to get 4 out of 5 people, 80%, to say, make again. I mean, we get people to make the recipe who then say, oh, I don't like mushrooms, and it was a mushroom dish. Well, they're not going to make it again. Thanks for making it. And, you can't make a recipe that, although we've had some recipes that appeal to almost everybody, 80% is a pretty high bar. And I would say probably a third of the recipes the first time they go out come back with significant comments that make us go back in the kitchen. The number one thing is make it simpler. It isn't so much that the recipe didn't work, but that it was an awful lot of effort. I think one of the things that we're always vigilant about in the test kitchen is, number one, we have people who shop and do the dishes, which you don't have at home, and is a real advantage, and sometimes you don't quite see what you're doing. The other thing is skill level. I mean, obviously everybody in the test kitchen is a fabulous cook, and they're really fast, and they're really efficient, and things come out great, but that isn't the way it works at home. That's kind of my job. Since I didn't go to cooking school, I'm the sort of naysayer and saying, really? You think people are gonna be able to do this at home? Because I don't think I can do this at home, and that's a bad sign. We'll then sometimes go back in the kitchen, retest the recipe, send it back out if we've streamlined the recipe or if we've come up with some troubleshooting, or it's a good clue about when we want to do illustrations or photographs. If we see that everybody's having trouble with the same part of the recipe, well, maybe we just need to illustrate that or photograph that so that people understand it better than the written recipe that we sent out.
Well, the best example of this was a year and a half ago with a chicken recipe. I tell this story many times, but it's such a great story. And the gentleman hated the recipe, would not make it again. He said it was one of the worst recipes ever made in his life. It was a sauteed chicken breast. And Jack noted at the bottom, there's sort of, place for comments. And he said, I substituted shrimp for the chicken. I mean, really. That's even beyond the pale for us, you know. And it was tough and overcooked. Yeah, really. Who would have thought? So we get a lot of those too.
Yeah, we expect that when it says basil, some people might use parsley, but you know,
shrimp for chicken.
You're on your own at that
water
level.
For chocolate, shrimp for chickens. How do you get involved with being one of our taste testers? You want
if you go to the homepage of cooksillustrated.com, there's a blurb that says "Recipe Testers Wanted," and you will become a friend of Cooks Illustrated or friend of America's Test Kitchen. And same thing at Cooks Country. There's a if you're a subscriber to Cooks Country, go to the homepage of the website. You can sign up, and you'll be sent more recipes for testing than you ever wanted.
You have to give us your checking account number too.
In your famous voice.
I'm still doing my job.
Yes.
She's making meringue cookies and wants to know about flavoring them. Let's say orange meringues. When do you add the zest and the orange oil, and etc.
Yeah, flavoring egg whites is pretty hard, but I would fold in your flavorings right after you've whipped them before you pipe the cookies at the last minute. I think if you add it too early, it might affect the whipping of the egg whites.
Especially the oils.
Yeah, and you can't add too much or it really affects the texture. The egg white.
Can you use the cream of tartar trick?
Yeah.
Meringue. Yeah,
well, I kind of assumed that we already had cream of tartar. You know.
You have a half teaspoon of cream of tartar in it.
Oh.
Excuse me. Yeah, put in a half teaspoon or quarter teaspoon of cream of tartar with the egg whites when they first start whipping.
Quarter teaspoon. Quarter teaspoon.
And that.
Or less. Sorry.
Otherwise, it'd be poisonous. You die. Publisher kills people in Cambridge. It helps stabilize the egg whites and makes them less likely to collapse. So you might want to try that. Thanks for coming. We'll be happy to sign. Is it the Healthy Cookbook tonight? At the back. Well, I don't know. It's Tuesday.